Hey everyone, thanks for having me here. I'm Nicolas, and yeah, I'm representing the Decentraland Foundation here. So Decentraland, for anyone who doesn't know, is a virtual world. It's a virtual world owned by its users, and the whole idea is that it's based on Ethereum blockchain, but I mean it's not defined by the blockchain, but it's an essential part of it. It's one of the first projects that built like NFTs that were more than just GIFs. So in Decentraland, I lead the SDK team. The SDK team is all about creating the tools that content creators use to create content for Decentraland. But in this talk, actually, I want to talk about something that is a bit more of a big picture. So I want to talk about how we're thinking bigger than that. We're not thinking about creating content for Decentraland specifically. We're thinking about our SDK as a tool for creating metaverse content in general for a bigger ecosystem. So what is the metaverse? No one here is asking, because I mean, it's something that we're hearing all the time. I still want to define it more precisely, because I feel like there's a lot of loose definitions of what the metaverse is, but the original definition of the metaverse is an evolution of the internet. It's a single platform. It's not like Facebook is creating a metaverse. Facebook didn't create an internet when they made Facebook. They're just creating a platform within the internet. And in the same way, when they're creating Meta, they're creating a single platform within a larger ecosystem, which is the metaverse. So the metaverse also has to be a persistent world. And it has to be a world that is embodied. So as a player, we experience the world through an avatar. And that is not a trivial thing. I mean, the avatar is something that also defines who you are. It creates identity. It's a way to experience this world in a more fluid and tangible way. And it's also a social space. And also, interestingly, the metaverse is a place that creates economic opportunities. There's people who can actually live off what they do in the metaverse. And that makes things matter in a very deep way. And the metaverse is, it's not just new technology. It's a whole shift in also culture. Because if you think about it, it's not an entirely new idea. There's been projects around for a very long time that have been trying to create a virtual world that is not a game. Think of Second Life and World of Warcraft. But there's even been earlier projects in the 90s that were 2D, like Neo Habitat and other projects like that also aspire to the same goal. But what I want to say is that the metaverse is, it's a way. It's how you think about what you can do in the virtual world, as well as what you can actually do, and how you consider that matters. But of course, I mean, we're still in transition. I like to clarify that, there's always a lot of hype about the metaverse being the next thing, but really, I mean, we're still trying to understand things as we go through the transition of this change. You can always, look back and join the dots and find patterns and give them names when you're looking back in time. But while you're living through history, it's you're just guessing and speculating about how things are going to line up. So all of our talks about the metaverse are always, trying to speculate about that. And I also like to think of, social networks as kind of a virtual world as itself. You don't have an avatar, but your avatar is kind of your profile picture, and you interact with others by writing posts and reacting to posts. So I like to think of the virtual spaces that we inhabit in social networks as kind of a virtual world where you act by turns. That, of course, is less legitimate. Everything you do is super curated. Everything you do is kind of fake in a way. Hopefully, if you have more real-time interaction with others, you'll have more legitimate interactions. I'd like to think that at least. But when you think about the new generations, younger kids, anyone who has cousins or sons or nieces that have 5-year-olds, they're playing on Roblox. That's how they connect with their friends, not on Facebook. And that new generation is going to grow to have the concept of going into a virtual world to meet your friends as something completely normalized and completely, it will be what they expect. So we talked about the metaverse being an evolution of the internet, and I like to take inspiration from the original internet, the internet that was born as an academic and completely philanthropic idea of connecting the world. I like to say that it's a perfect decentralized platform because it was based on protocols. HTTP, TCP, UDP, et cetera, all of those things made up the backbone of the internet. And I like to think that didn't happen as, closed products made by companies. It was all open standards that were meant to be shared outwards. And in part, I think that happened because at the time, no one thought of, the internet and computers even as, a multi-million-dollar industry. It was just, a nerdy hobby that people did in their basements, and it just happened to become extremely lucrative. But the people didn't dive into their projects thinking about, that end game. But the internet of today is a whole different story. The internet of today is all made up of closed wall gardens and companies, trying to max out how much value they can get out of our time. And as players, people using different tools, we're the product. We are being exploited for, ad time and, attention. By the way, a disclaimer, all of these corny images that I have here, they're all generated with AI. So some of them are extremely corny, some of them bizarre. I just had fun with that idea of let's throw all of my prompts into AI and see what they do. So, as I was saying, in the context of the metaverse, this virtual world matters a lot more because now there's whole lives, whole identities, worlds of people working together that suddenly matter almost as much as the real world to some people. So, if one company has power to do anything over that context, you could think of that being a level of power that no government, no corrupt or authoritarian government has ever even been able to dream of having. If you can change the world at a base layer, you have incredible power. So yeah, that's dangerous. And there's a reason why all of the original literature that created the concept of the metaverse, if you think of Ready Player One, Snow Crash, Neuromancer, they were all dystopias. I mean, they were all painting a picture of the world where there was a single company with all of the power, and it was completely abusing that and having people suffer from that. And it feels almost like human nature, inevitable to think that if someone has that crazy level of power, they're gonna eventually be corrupted by it. At Decentraland, we have a lemma, which is kind of an evolution from Google's, don't be evil, and it's can't be evil. The idea is that we can't, use this power for evil, even if we wanted to, even if, we changed hands and someone else took the reins. And the key to that is decentralization. So a little break from all of these cute pictures. This is a chart that we did, thinking about what are the things you can decentralize in a platform. And thinking about platforms in a more general sense, right? Because you have, on one extreme, you have the web, and the other have Roblox. And in Decentraland, we are trying to be as much as we can as the web and less like Roblox. So the creation tools, that first line there, refers to how content is created for the platform. So for the internet, there is you can write HTML in whatever you want. In Roblox, you have to use the Roblox editor and their environment. To play back content in the web, there's multiple browsers. You have Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Brave, whatever. In Roblox, you have just Roblox as a way to play a game. Discovery methods also refer to how you find content. In the web, there's multiple search engines. You can choose which one to use. The marketplace, same story. Customer contact refers to, if I subscribe to a content creator, am I doing it directly through a content creator, or am I doing it through the platform as a medium? For example, on YouTube, when I subscribe to some content creator I hit subscribe on YouTube. I'm not sending my email to the guy who made the videos. If the guy who made the videos wants to change platforms, they lose all of their followers directly, because the followers are stored in YouTube's own database of content and users. And the customer financial relationship is a similar concept. It refers to whenever there's a transaction between a user and a content creator, does the platform step in the middle? Does it take a share? Or is it completely disambiguated from that? So, as I said before, I work in the SDK team, so the creation tools are really the part of this that is, my bread and butter, what I care about the most here. But this whole thing tells the story of how the different ways in which we can think about decentralizing, our product. There's a lot more, but I'd like to stick to these to, not make the talk all that much longer. But of course, there's trade-offs. In every one of these things, if we go from being centralized to decentralized, there's things we're losing. Because when we're centralized, it's safer. Of course, the infrastructure as a user of this, I feel safer because the big company that owns the platform has more to lose in the reputation if they were to cheat me in some way than just one content creator. And coherence and consistency are also important because if there's just one way to subscribe in YouTube, then as a user I learn that pattern, and then I'm going to use that consistently, and I know how to use that. Whilst otherwise, if every single content creator had their own tools, their own way to let you subscribe, it's potentially really jarring and complicated for users to navigate that. So how do we escape that, this dichotomy of, centralization versus and ease versus decentralization and making things hard? The blockchain. So thanks to the blockchain, we can have consensus-generating mechanisms that don't rely on someone sitting on the chair and pushing buttons. The smart contract doesn't have a hidden agenda. It can't be corrupted. You can read its code and validate that it's really doing what it says it's doing. So through the blockchain, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have both things there. So, however, we can't do everything with the blockchain. In the context of Decentraland as a virtual world, from the very start, the white paper of Decentraland already introduced this concept of having different layers, and having a consensus layer and a real-time layer. The consensus layer is everything blockchain about Decentraland, and that part of the architecture is pretty solidly decentralized simply because of its blockchain nature. But then there's stuff you can't do on the blockchain, right? I mean, you have to be able to run through a virtual world, interact with others, open doors, chat with other people. And if all of those things were to be, transactions on the blockchain, just imagine how slow it would be and how expensive it would be. And we definitely wouldn't, meet the expectations of players who have, become used to playing games on, non-blockchain platforms. So it would be completely, unplayable if we were to do everything within the blockchain. So within the consensus layer, we have, the tokens mana, the land parcels, which each parcel of land, each block of land is tokenized. The wearables that players can use inside the Decentraland are also tokenized. We recently, just this week, released also emote NFTs. So different animations that players can play are also tokenized, and you can buy a special, crazy dance or whatever. But also we're open to all kinds of NFTs in the whole Ethereum ecosystem. So we can represent many different tokens in different ways. We can gate experiences so that you can only get in if you own a certain token, or we can even transform experiences so that having a certain token gives you more points at doing something, or whatever content creators decide to do. And the DAO is also an interesting part of this. The DAO is a consensus generating mechanism. Anyone who has any of those tokens can vote, and there's all kinds of different proposals that are done by the community. There's grants being given to content creators or to whoever has any project that is of value to the community. They can, publish a proposal, and if that gets voted, it gets automatically funded by the DAO itself. And so in this sense, this layer, I think, passes the test of, can't be evil. With this, I think we have a pretty solid foundation. But now if we move into the real-time layer, we have stuff like player comms, like me talking to you if we're both in the Decentraland, how do those communications get sent from one to the other? Or the storage of scenes. If I build a castle in the Decentraland, where is that information? Are those 3D models stored? And who owns that storage? The rendering engine refers to how we display the 3D content. The global UI refers to things like the map or the chat windows, and everything that is not part of the content that content creators create, but part of what's always with you as you explore the Decentraland. And of course the SDK, which is what I work with all the time. So how do we decentralize each of these things? Well, we have different methods for each one. So for the comms, we use P2P. So there's player-to-player communications from one player to the other, and if there's a whole network of players, they relay messages between one another. That, of course, is not the fastest, but there's also alternatives for specific content creators to, actually, this is something that we're still working on, but very soon we'll allow content creators to switch the protocols being used so that they can put their own WebSocket server for their specific scene so that players can communicate faster with each other. Content storage, like for that, we have a decentralized network of peers. So there's, I think, like 12 different machines all in this network. And through the DAO, anyone can propose to add another machine. If it gets added, like it's one more node in this network. And so like we don't own this network. If we flip a switch and disappear, that network keeps on working and it keeps on, serving the function. Now, the rendering engine and the global UI are both done in Unity, and that was a bit of a challenge because Unity is not a fully open source project, so we couldn't fully open source everything there. There were parts that, like, by contract we can. So what we decided is to call this a reference implementation. So what we mean by this is, like, the internet has, all of these different browsers. We created Internet Explorer, but we're allowing people to create different browsers. If someone wants to come along and create Chrome, please do. And we want to make it easy for people to create their own alternative versions of, the Decentraland rendering engine. So they could, for example, have instead of Unity, have Unreal engine running Decentraland and other things like that. And the SDK, we're thinking of it as a global, like, open standard. There is meant to be just one, but that one SDK needs to be, open to everyone, and it needs to be easy for the community to make contributions and for it to evolve in an open way that everyone can participate in. So we have a problem here, though, and it's that the rendering engine and the SDK are not so clearly split up one with the other. Like, when we created these things, we created them, as all projects in a hurry and trying to do 1,000 things at the same time with a small team, and there isn't a clear separation between one thing and the other. And that is a problem because content creators that want to create an alternative engine or do different things outside this monolith of SDK and engine altogether have problems. It's not impossible though, and there have been some success cases. Like we have had a few alternative engines to Decentraland. For example, there is a VR engine that runs, using Unity also, but with VRs, and that works beautifully. It's in beta now, but it was created by someone in the community, not by the foundation. And that is soon going to be officially launched, but it's already available in beta. There's also been projects to, for example, render Decentraland from a bird's eye view. So you can see, almost like in, a topographical map or like, Google Maps when you see the satellite view. You can see all of the content rendered, but as 2D images. There's also a project to have Decentraland in an isomorphic view, so like sort of in an angle. And all of these projects are possible, they have been done, but they have been really hard because of this, non-clear separation. And also we've had very great, creation tools that were not created by the foundation as well. There's a lot of different editors, some based on Unity. There's a Unity plugin also. There are a lot of different libraries that can be used within Decentraland. And there's even a VR editor where you can create content just dragging and dropping things with your VR headsets on as well. But to make this a lot easier, we are working on the SDK version 7. And that is what we've been working on kind of silently for the past 6 months or so. And that is our biggest thing that we'll be releasing in quite a bit now. Actually, we have plans of releasing a beta in probably a couple of weeks. There's no clear date, but it's going to be soon. And with that, we hope to have one clear separation between these two monoliths. The SDK and the engine will be clearly separated, and we'll be calling the SDK a protocol. We'll be defining and documenting that properly. Also, this will have benefits in performance. There's going to be a lot of bottlenecks that we solved, and also in usability. And I don't have time to go into this, but usability is probably the thing I'm most passionate about here. And I really want to make content easy to create in Decentraland, and that's essential for the platform to grow. And so a lot of the things we are doing with the SDK 7 will also open the door for making a lot of the main pain points that content creators have a lot easier to solve. So coming back to this point of portability, we envision the SDK as being a standard and being a way to collect all of these different elements that make up Decentraland. But we want people to start, making branches. We want not just mods, as in regular games. We want branches that are legitimate and stand on their own selves, where people can switch around different things about the platform. So you can, change the avatars and suddenly, use, yeah, the crypto voxel avatars or the sandbox avatars instead, or change the UI, or change the engine completely, do something in Unreal, change the content in the land, like forget about the land tokens and put your own land tokens that have their own content on them and create a different economy, a different place, all based on the SDK that is the generalized protocol for describing the content creation of Decentraland. It's no longer a tool that belongs to a platform. It is an open tool that belongs to this bigger vision of a metaverse. Like, we want to have one single metaverse that is made from many different interoperable platforms, and the way to get there is by creating standards and creating different ways that are common towards all platforms. Of course, we're not going to get this right in the first go. It's going to take iterations, and it's going to take a lot of different negotiations and mergers and things. But I do believe that this is the way to go if we want to realize the real dream of the metaverse as a single new internet, let's call it. So yes, that's all I wanted to say, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. Due to time constraints, I believe that we will have to cut it here. But thank you once again. Please give him a big round of applause. Thank you very much.